Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical themes in the first leg of Chelsea's 2-0 Carabao Cup semi-final win over Tottenham. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on how both sides look to press, then we'll shift to Chelsea's attacking shape, and lastly we'll briefly analyze the second half adjustments. So when we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Spurs starting in a 3-4-2-1, and Chelsea on paper were supposed to start in a 4-2-1, but throughout the game we witnessed them shift into various attacking shapes throughout their build-up play. We did know that they started in a back four, so first we'll focus on Chelsea's attacking shape rather than the pressing. And what you end up seeing was that Chelsea did look like more of a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2, because we ended up having Lukaku occupying the center backs, but it was Havertz ahead of Tanganga, but then looking to shift laterally to connect with Lukaku and occupy defenders when Chelsea had possession. Ziyech was often drifting into central areas, and then you could see Mason Mount dropping off into a pocket of space to the right of Skip and space behind Lucas Moura. Now you could see that 4-2-2-2 assembling, and what you ended up seeing from the wider players was that Alonso was pushing forward to occupy Emerson, and then that's where it did shift to more of a 3-2-5, with Azpilicueta able to break forward as well. Alonso was pegging back Emerson, and then Mount was able to drop off into space on the outside of Skip and just in behind Lucas Moura. As you could see, Havertz occupying two defenders, and it created space for Lukaku to isolate Davies, or simply get Havertz into a position where he could isolate a defender, as Lukaku would be taking away two center backs. In this scenario, at times Ziyech would be tucking in central and dragging away Doherty, and because Son and Lucas Moura were closing down Jorginho and Saul, Azpilicueta often received space to push forward. If that wasn't the case, Lukaku or Havertz could shift into that Doherty-Davies gap, and then you could see the spare Chelsea attacking player occupying Sanchez and Tanganga. That leaves space for Mount to receive the ball and break forward, and again it creates space for Azpilicueta to push forward. Even if that's not the case, Azpilicueta would pull out Doherty, because in that midfield zone, with Ziyech tucking in central, Højbjerg would be forced to pick him up, and then Skip would have to shift out to close down Mount, as Saul and Jorginho were pulling away Lucas Moura and Son. The other alternative for Chelsea would be to have Azpilicueta sit a bit deeper, and then you could see Ziyech shifting out towards the touchline, as he was freely enjoying 1v1s against Doherty, who was unable to prevent him from cutting centrally onto his left foot. If you look to an example, it's a Havertz switch out towards Ziyech, which allows him to run at Doherty, and you can see that Azpilicueta is making a free overlapping run from a deep position. As the play develops, Ziyech is able to deliver a cross into the penalty area because neither Højbjerg or Doherty stepped towards him, and you could see that Davies is ball watching, and that Ziyech delivery falls into the path of Lukaku, who makes a run just ahead of Davinson Sanchez, who's nowhere near him. But from this position, Lukaku ends up nodding a free header inches wide of the net. There were occasions where Havertz and Mount swapped positions and Havertz dropped off into that inside left position, and from there you'd see Mount looking to make runs off Skip to receive the ball in behind Emerson. And while there were occasions where Skip tracked his movement, that was an area for Chelsea to get the ball into attacking zones. If that wasn't the case, when Havertz received the ball, you'd see Mount taking up his duties and occupying a center back or two, or looking to check into the ball to receive it between the lines, and you could see them combine around Skip to get Havertz into an attacking position. Outside of that, Lukaku was a willing runner out into the channels to get onto the ball, and he did cause Davies and Sanchez issues, but in most situations Chelsea were attacking with 5, and they were able to get Saul to push forward on occasion from central areas to make it 6, or their main outlet was out in that right channel with Azpilicueta pushing forward and looking to get onto the ball in Spurs' third. The manner in which Chelsea pressed was straightforward. They ended up having Lukaku and Havertz looking to close down the center backs. Mount was stepping forward to close down the deepest midfielder, whether it be Skip or Højbjerg, but it was often Skip. And then you'd see Saul stepping forward to deal with Højbjerg. When Emerson could receive the ball, that's where you would see Alonso shifting across, 2-step forward and close him down. And there was a rare occasion where Tanganga would be the free man if Havertz couldn't shift across. And we did witness Mount stepping towards him to close him down and blocking off the passing lane in towards Skip. In the build-up to Chelsea's opener, it's Tanganga sliding the ball across Havertz for Emerson, and it's Marcos Alonso stepping forward to close him down and win possession. And as that play develops, Alonso slides the ball across Tanganga for Havertz, making a run off his shoulder into left half space. And from this position, you could witness that Havertz holds off the pressure from Tanganga and can pull the ball back to Mount or Lukaku, but he ends up firing an effort off Davinson Sanchez and beyond Lloris. That means that Jorginho is the free man, and he was looking to close down Lucas Moura, who was dropping off into the midfield zone for the most part to receive the ball. It leaves Spurs with Son and Kane up front, and Sarr, Rudiger, and Azpilicueta were tasked with dealing with them in a 3v2 advantage, as Ziyech was often dropping off deeper to deal with Doherty. We witnessed that more as Chelsea dropped off into deeper positions, because what you ended up seeing was that they did shift to more of a 5-3-2 on occasion when they were out of possession, and that was because Ziyech was dropping off deeper to deal with Doherty pushing into advanced areas. In many scenarios, Chelsea did a very good job of having Lukaku and Havertz closing down the Spurs center backs and ensuring that that 3v2 overload up front didn't harm them. But as you can see, if they were able to get the ball to the spare man, then you would simply just need Saul or Mount to shift across to close him down and then block off the passing lane in towards their midfielder that they were tasked with. Therefore, when we shift to Spurs' press, what we ended up seeing was that they had Kane looking to step towards the center backs, and rather than having Son and Lucas Moura looking to close down Alonso and Azpilicueta, those two were tucking in centrally to deal with Saul and Jorginho. That means that the wing backs do have to push forward in Emerson and Doherty to close down Azpilicueta and Alonso, and then out in that midfield zone, it would be Skip or Højbjerg dealing with Mount, as there was the threat of Ziyech tucking in central, so one of the spare midfielders had to be free to deal with that man. Havertz initially was playing off the left, so when he dropped off deeper, Tanganga would be tracking his movement, but like I said, Havertz and Lukaku were looking to occupy the three center backs. On paper, if Spurs do press in this manner, yes, they do give up the 2v1 between the center backs, but you'd want to have Kane looking to close down Rudiger and perhaps have Sarr push forward to attempt to force him into mistakes. That would still allow you to have a 3v2 up front. The issue that Spurs had was between Son and Lucas Moura, because there were times where you would see Son stepping towards Rudiger and looking to block off the passing lane into Saul, or simply looking to block off the passing lane into Azpilicueta, because in those situations, you could still have Højbjerg stepping towards Saul, and then one of the spare center backs stepping towards Ziyech. Ultimately, if we did witness a more aggressive press from Spurs, they could simply have one of Son or Lucas Moura stepping towards the spare center back, and then have Skip and Højbjerg squeeze on Saul and Jorginho and gamble on Ziyech and Mount receiving the ball between the lines, knowing the fact that it would only be one as they do have 3v2 at the back. Still, what we ended up seeing was that with Ziyech and Mount tucking in centrally, they were occupying Højbjerg and Skip, and when Lucas Moura in particular was looking to step towards Sarr, Jorginho was free to receive the ball on several occasions. Or there were times where simply Emerson wasn't able to step high on Alonso, and then he was the spare man, and with Son tucking in on Saul and Ziyech looking to drag in Doherty, that would leave Azpilicueta free, and even if Ziyech was occupying Højbjerg, there were times where Doherty couldn't step, and Azpilicueta was the spare man to play through the press. We witnessed the issue with Spurs' pressing as Lucas Moura is taken out of the game by Sarr, and that allows Alonso to square the ball between Emerson and Lucas Moura for Jorginho. As that play develops, Jorginho is able to split Skip and Højbjerg for Ziyech drifting laterally in towards space between the lines, and you can see that Mount is also free in that area to the right of Skip. Another manner in which Chelsea could bypass that Spurs press is by having Saul or Jorginho dropping into their own third to pick up the ball, and then they were able to simply play passes around Son or Lucas Moura to get into Spurs' half. Here you see Jorginho dropping ahead of Lucas Moura and Kane to get onto the ball, and he slides the ball to a free Marcos Alonso, and by the time Emerson and Lucas Moura look to close down the Chelsea left back, it creates a gap for Alonso to slide the ball between both of them for Jorginho making a free run into the midfield zone. When Kane dropped off deeper in towards the midfield zone, he was often swarmed. If Jorginho couldn't pick up Lucas Moura, you witnessed Sarr tracking his movement tightly into that midfield area. And regardless, what you ended up seeing was that Kane was often closed down by both center backs, and Azpilicueta was able to track the movement of Son due to Ziyech dropping deeper to deal with Doherty. In the second half, we witnessed both managers shift their system. Spurs moved to more of a 4-2-3-1 with Ndombele entering the game, and due to Kai Havertz forcing to depart, we witnessed Timo Werner enter the game and Chelsea shifted to a 4-3-3. Ultimately, this meant that there was a 3v3 battle in that midfield zone, and in terms of pressing, we witnessed both sides make alterations. Chelsea were able to push Lukaku up against the center backs, and their one downfall was that Werner was stepping towards Tanganga and looking to block off the passing lane into Emerson, which simply freed up Emerson down that right-hand side. It forced Alonso to step towards him, and then Sarr was tasked with dealing with Lucas Moura. In most cases, we witnessed Lukaku and Werner stepping towards the center backs, Saul and Mount stepping towards Højbjerg and Skip, and Jorginho tracking the movement of Ndombele. Meanwhile, when Spurs looked to press, they had Lucas Moura looking to block off the passing lane in towards Sarr, and then that freed up space for Alonso to receive the ball down that flank. Emerson couldn't step forward because Werner was adopting that space, and from a Spurs perspective, Ndombele was receiving the ball between the lines and looking to make forward runs in towards the penalty area, and he provided a brief spark of energy by making those forward runs in towards the penalty area to give Spurs an additional attacking option. Essentially, Spurs could still have Højbjerg stepping towards Saul and Ndombele on Jorginho and Skip tracking the movement of Mount. But Chelsea still found it relatively easy to bypass their press due to the fact that they weren't closing down as a unit. But outside of Ndombele's brief spark, Kane was still dropping off deeper, this time receiving the ball between the lines as the Chelsea center backs weren't tracking his movement, but he failed to provide an impact in those zones. And Chelsea comfortably coped with the system change from both managers. However, when we look to how they were able to attack, it was Timo Werner getting the better of Emerson by making runs across him and getting into positions where he was able to go 1v1 with the right back. So here we could see Emerson applying pressure on Werner, and the German looking to spin across that pressure to break at the back line. As that play continues, Werner is able to carry the ball towards Tanganga, and Højbjerg does shift across, but it creates a gap for Werner to slide the ball between Højbjerg and Tanganga for Lukaku, who's in that gap between Davinson Sanchez and Davies. When Lukaku receives the ball, no pressure is applied towards him instantly, and because Davies nor Sanchez step, Lukaku looks to slide the ball across the left back for Ziyech breaking free into right half space, and from here he could either pull the ball back to Lukaku or take a shot on goal, but he ends up letting the ball go across his body, and he side foots a tame effort at Lloris. Then we could shift to Werner running at Emerson as he received the ball from Alonso, and you could witness Ziyech making a run across Tanganga. That should create space for Werner to cut in across the left back, but you also witness the underlapping run of Mason Mount to take Winks out of the game. As that play develops, you could see Ziyech and Mount take two Spurs players out of the game, and that creates space for Werner to cut across Emerson in left half space, and from there you could see the shooting angle that Werner is able to create from the runs of his two Chelsea teammates, and while Højbjerg and Winks can't shut him down, Werner still ends up bending an effort inches wide of the net. So as you can see, Tuchel's tactical approach resulted in a comfortable win for Chelsea as they limited Spurs from creating in the opening half and easily bypassed Conte's disjointed Spurs defensive shape.